You ever wonder what ancient humans did when they weren't hunting? When they weren't gathering? When they weren't desperately trying not to die? Because here's the thing nobody talks about. Ancient humans had downtime, and lots of it, way more than you'd think. And what they did during those hours might completely change how you see our species. See, we imagine our ancestors as constantly on edge, always in survival mode, every single moment dedicated to not becoming a saber-toothed cat's dinner. But that's not actually how it worked. Archaeological evidence shows that ancient hunter-gatherers only needed to work about 4 to 6 hours a day to meet all their survival needs. Everything else, that was free time, and what they did with it reveals something fascinating about what it means to be human. Let's start with the most obvious one, games. And I don't mean modern games. I mean the kinds of games that required nothing but time and creativity. Archaeological sites across Europe, Africa, and Asia have uncovered dice made from bone and stone dating back tens of thousands of years. Dice. Not gambling necessarily, though probably sometimes gambling, but organized play with rules and chance. People were rolling bone cubes for entertainment while sitting around fires 40,000 years ago. We know this because we found them in graves, deliberately buried with the dead, which tells us they mattered enough to take into the afterlife. But it gets wilder. There's evidence of board games going back at least 5,000 years. The royal game of from ancient Mesopotamia, games in ancient Egypt, games in ancient China. People weren't just playing these once in a while. These games show up in tombs, they show up in artwork, they show up repeatedly across cultures separated by thousands of miles. This wasn't a bug in human nature. This was a feature. We are fundamentally game-playing creatures. Then there's music, and the evidence here is absolutely stunning. We found flutes made from bone and mammoth ivory dating back over 40,000 years. Not simple whistles, actual flutes with multiple holes, capable of playing different notes, complex melodies. Some of these instruments are sophisticated enough that modern musicians can still play recognizable music on them. Ancient humans weren't just making noise, they were making music, they were making art. They were doing it so much that they left physical evidence across continents. Singing, too, almost certainly. We don't have recordings, obviously, but we have every reason to believe it. If you have language and you have the ability to produce sound, and especially if you have downtime, you're going to sing. Humans sing, it's what we do. Every culture on Earth sings. There's no known human society that doesn't have music. The oldest human societies we know about definitely had music. Art. This one blows people's minds when they really think about it. Cave paintings, tens of thousands of years old, hand stencils, drawings of animals that are astonishingly detailed and accurate. We're talking about ochre and charcoal applied to rock faces in total darkness, by firelight, with no expectation that anyone would ever see it besides maybe their immediate community. Some of these paintings are in caves so remote and dangerous to access that people had to crawl through tight spaces, climb treacherous drops, venture into complete darkness just to paint on a wall. And then they did it anyway. They did it repeatedly. Different layers of paintings on top of each other in some caves, suggesting people came back to these places across centuries, maybe millennia, just to add their art to the wall. This is one of the hardest facts to accept about ancient humans. They created beauty that served no survival function. They created it anyway. They spent limited time and energy on it because something in their brain demanded it. That's not an ancient human thing. That's a human thing. That's us. Storytelling. We don't have recordings of this, but we have every piece of indirect evidence pointing to it. Around a fire, in the dark, with hours to fill before sleep, with nothing to do but sit and talk and eat and rest. The natural thing that emerges is narrative, stories, people telling stories. We know this because every single human culture ever documented has a deep storytelling tradition. The oldest stories we've actually recorded go back thousands of years, but they're clearly echoes of much older traditions. The structure of myth and legend is so consistent across cultures separated by massive distances that it had to come from the deep human past. And here's the thing. You don't naturally invent stories unless you have time to tell them. You don't naturally develop complex narrative structures unless you're doing it for thousands of generations. Ancient humans were definitely telling stories. Then there's the weird stuff. We found evidence of body modification in the archaeological record that goes back incredibly far. Scarification, tattooing, piercing, not for survival, not for practical reasons, for self-expression, for identity, for art. We've found jewelry, pendants, ornaments, decorative objects made from bone and stone and shell going back tens of thousands of years. Some of these items were clearly made with enormous effort for no reason other than personal adornment. People spent hours crafting things that would only be seen by their community or only by themselves because they wanted to, because that impulse to create, to decorate, to express something about who they are is older than agriculture. It's older than civilization. It's older than everything except the human capacity for consciousness itself. There's evidence of social gathering spots where archaeological sites show repeated occupation for reasons that weren't about resource availability. People showed up to the same place repeatedly to hang out, to gather, to be together, probably to tell stories and play games and make music and exchange goods and gossip and do all the things humans do when they're just hanging out with their community. And here's what all of this adds up to. Ancient humans were not drastically different from us in their need for entertainment, for creativity, for art, for social connection, for play. They had less stuff, they had simpler tools, they had different concerns, but the core of what makes us human, the part of us that wants to create and play and tell stories and express ourselves and gather in communities and make beautiful things, that was already there. That was there 40,000 years ago. That was probably there 100,000 years ago. That might have been there for the entire existence of our species. We are fundamentally creatures who do things that don't need to be done, just because doing them matters to us. Ancient humans understood that. They prioritized it. They spent their downtime on it, and that might be the most human thing about them.